My name is Elena Whitmore, and the day I got married was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I always imagined looking into the crowd and seeing my parents smiling with pride. I thought they would be there when I walked down the aisle, holding back tears and celebrating the woman I had become. But when the wedding day arrived, the two people I wanted to see the most were missing. Their empty seats felt louder than anything else around me. I could hear the music, see the guests, and feel everyone's excitement. But a part of me was still waiting for the doors to open. A small part of me hoped my parents would walk in at the last second and tell me they had changed their minds. But they never came. For years, I had tried to convince myself that my relationship with my parents was normal. I believed that if I worked harder, helped more, and made them proud enough, things would finally change. I was the daughter who followed every rule. I avoided arguments, helped whenever they needed me, and always tried to keep peace in the family. Growing up, I noticed the difference between how my parents treated me and how they treated my younger brother, Bennett. He was always celebrated for his achievements, while my efforts often went unnoticed. When he needed help, my parents were always there. When I needed support, I usually had to handle things on my own. I never complained because I wanted to believe they loved me in their own way. When I met Caleb Mercer, everything started to feel different. He saw my kindness, my struggles, and the parts of me that my own family ignored. With him, I didn't feel like I had to prove my worth. I felt accepted. When we decided to get married, I truly believed my parents would finally see my happiness and support me. I thought this would be the moment when our family would come together. But 1 week before the wedding, everything changed. My parents sat me down and told me they would not attend. Their words felt impossible to understand. They said they couldn't support my decision and believed they were doing what was best. I remember sitting there silently, trying to process how the people who raised me could choose to miss such an important moment. I cried, I questioned myself, and I wondered if I had done something wrong. But after everything I had given, I knew I couldn't let their choice take away the happiness I had found. So I walked toward the altar without them beside me. My heart was broken, but I kept moving forward because I knew my life could not be defined by the people who chose to leave. As I looked back on my life, I started to see something I had ignored for many years. It wasn't just about my wedding. The signs had always been there. I had spent my whole childhood feeling like I came second in my own family. No matter what I did, it never seemed to be enough to make my parents proud of me in the way they were proud of Bennett. I remember birthdays when my brother opened expensive presents while I smiled and thanked my parents for much smaller gifts. I told myself it didn't matter because I didn't want to seem ungrateful. When Bennett wanted something, my parents found a way to give it to him. When I wanted something, I was told to be patient or earn it myself. School became the place where I felt I could prove myself. I studied late into the night, worked hard on every assignment, and pushed myself to get the best grades possible. When I received certificates and academic awards, I carried them home with excitement, hoping to see my parents smile. Most of the time, they simply nodded, said good job, and moved on with their day. If Bennett scored 1 goal in a weekend game, they celebrated for days and told everyone they knew. What hurt even more was how differently we were treated when we made mistakes. If Bennett forgot something or got into trouble, my parents always had an excuse for him. They said he was still learning or that everyone makes mistakes. But when I slipped up, I was expected to know better. I was reminded that I should be more responsible because I was the older child. After a while, I stopped expecting comfort from them. Whenever something upset me, I kept it to myself. I believed that being a good daughter meant staying quiet, solving my own problems, and never making life harder for anyone else. I became good at hiding disappointment behind a smile. When I finished college, I decided to build my own future. I didn't ask my parents for money or connections. I found work, learned everything I could, and slowly built a career in interior design. Every project taught me to believe in myself a little more. For the first time, I felt proud of what I had achieved on my own. Then I met Caleb. He listened when I spoke and cared about my dreams. He never compared me to anyone or made me feel like I had to compete for love. Being with him felt peaceful. His family welcomed me from the beginning, and I finally understood what it felt like to be accepted without conditions. When I introduced Caleb to my parents, I hoped they would see what I saw. Instead, they focused on his income, his background, and what other people might think. Their comments became sharper every time we visited. Soon, those opinions turned into pressure, leaving me to wonder if my happiness had ever truly mattered to them at all. Only a few days before the wedding, my mother asked me to come to my parents' house because she said we needed to have one final conversation. I thought she wanted to help with the last wedding plans or maybe make peace before the big day. Instead, the moment I sat down, I realized something was very wrong. My father stayed quiet while my mother did all the talking. She looked at me and said there was still time to cancel the wedding. At first, I thought she was joking, but the serious look on her face told me she meant every word. She told me Caleb was not the right man for me. According to her, I was making a huge mistake that would affect the rest of my life. She said I deserved someone with more money, more influence, and a better family name. I listened without interrupting because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Then she admitted something that left me completely shocked. Over the past few months, she had been speaking to friends and relatives, trying to introduce me to men from wealthy families. She had even arranged opportunities for me to meet some of them without telling me the real reason. At the time, I believed those gatherings were normal family events. Now I understood that she had been hoping I would leave Caleb before the wedding. I looked at my father, hoping he would disagree with her or tell her she had gone too far. Instead, he quietly nodded and said they only wanted what they believed was best for me. Hearing those words hurt more than I can explain. I told them calmly that I loved Caleb and that I had already made my decision. I wasn't interested in anyone else, and I wasn't going to cancel the wedding because of money or social status. That was when everything changed. My mother looked straight at me and said that if I married Caleb, I would no longer have them in my life. She said they would not come to the wedding, they would not celebrate my marriage, and they would consider my choice a rejection of the family. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. I never imagined that my parents would make their love depend on whether I obeyed them. I always believed family love was supposed to be unconditional. When I left their house, I felt completely broken. I drove home in silence, trying to understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. As soon as Caleb saw me, he knew something had happened. I told him everything through tears. He didn't speak badly about my parents or try to make me angry. He simply held my hand and reminded me that marriage is about standing beside the person you love, especially when life becomes difficult. His words gave me the strength I needed. I knew the decision would cost me my relationship with my parents, but I also knew I couldn't build my future by giving up the person who truly loved me. Even though my heart was heavy, I chose to move forward with the wedding and accept whatever came next. The morning of my wedding arrived faster than I expected. Everyone around me was smiling, fixing decorations, checking flowers, and making sure everything was perfect. I tried to enjoy every moment, but deep inside I was carrying a weight that no one else could fully see. While getting ready, I kept looking at my phone, hoping for a message from my parents. Even a short text saying they had changed their minds would have meant everything to me. My phone stayed silent. When it was finally time to walk down the aisle, I took a deep breath and stepped forward. Every few steps, my eyes moved toward the entrance of the venue. I kept thinking maybe they were running late. Maybe they would surprise me by walking through those doors before the ceremony began. I held on to that hope until the very last moment. The music continued, the guests stood, and the ceremony started. The doors never opened. I couldn't stop myself from looking at the 2 seats that had been saved for my parents. They remained empty from beginning to end. Seeing those empty chairs hurt more than I expected. They reminded me that my parents had made a choice, and that choice was not to be there for their daughter. I felt tears filling my eyes, but I didn't want sadness to take over such an important day. I looked at Caleb, and the way he smiled at me gave me enough strength to keep going. His calm face reminded me why I was standing there in the first place. After the ceremony, Caleb's family surrounded me with kindness. They hugged me, congratulated me, and treated me like I had always been part of their family. I never felt like an outsider with them. During the reception, Caleb's grandmother, Mavis Hollowell, asked for everyone's attention. She stood up slowly, holding her glass, and looked directly at me. She said that family is not measured by the people who share your last name. Family is made of the people who choose to stand beside you when life becomes difficult. She told me I already had a place in their hearts, and that I would never have to earn their love. Her words touched everyone in the room, including me. As the celebration continued, our videographer quietly recorded everything. He captured the laughter, the dancing, and the joyful moments with our guests. He also caught the moments when I became emotional, when Caleb gently held my hand, and when friends shared stories about our journey together. At the time, I thought it was simply a beautiful memory that we would watch on future anniversaries. When the night ended, I believed the worst part of my life was finally behind me. I thought the pain would slowly fade and that I could focus on building my future with Caleb. I had no idea that what my parents had been saying and doing behind my back would soon come to light, changing everything once again. A few weeks after the wedding, life slowly started to feel normal again. Caleb and I were settling into our new home, and I was trying to leave the past behind. I thought the hardest part was over, but then I received a phone call from my cousin, Maribel Voss. Her voice sounded careful, as if she didn't know how to tell me what she had heard. She asked if it was true that I had refused to let my parents be part of my wedding. At first, I didn't understand what she meant. Then she explained that several relatives had been told I didn't want my parents there. According to the story they were sharing, I had pushed them away, ignored their feelings, and decided to cut them out of my life before the ceremony. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It wasn't enough that they had chosen not to come. Now they were telling everyone that I was the reason they had been absent. My heart sank because I knew some people would believe them without ever asking me what really happened. After ending the call, I opened my old messages. I read every conversation I had with my parents during the weeks before the wedding. There they were, one after another. I had invited them to the ceremony, asked them to join the rehearsal dinner, and even begged them to reconsider their decision. I had written that I loved them and wanted them beside me on one of the biggest days of my life. Every message showed that I never stopped trying to fix our relationship. Looking at those words brought tears to my eyes. I remembered how much hope I still had back then. I had believed that if I reached out one more time, they might choose love over pride. Instead, they had taken my kindness and turned it into a story that made them look like the ones who had been hurt. A few days later, Maribel came to visit me. She told me that after some relatives saw the messages, many of them realized the truth. They finally understood that my parents had left out the most important part of the story. Maribel apologized for believing the rumors at first, and I appreciated her honesty. That conversation changed something inside me. I realized I had spent most of my life protecting my parents. Whenever people asked about our family, I covered for them. I made excuses for their behavior because I didn't want anyone to think badly of them. I cared more about their reputation than they cared about mine. For the first time, I stopped asking myself what I could do to make them love me. I stopped wondering how to earn their approval. I finally understood that I wasn't responsible for the choices they made. From that day forward, I decided to stop chasing people who never wanted to meet me halfway and start giving my time and energy to the people who truly cared about me. Several months passed after our wedding before the finished video was ready. One afternoon, the package finally arrived at our house. I waited until the evening, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat down with Caleb to watch it. I was nervous because I thought it would bring back all the sadness I had felt that day. As the video began, I expected to focus on the empty seats and the pain of my parents' absence. Instead, I noticed something completely different. The camera had captured so many beautiful moments that I had almost forgotten. There were smiles, laughter, warm hugs, and people who were genuinely happy for us. For the first time, I saw my wedding through someone else's eyes. I watched Caleb say his vows with tears in his eyes as he promised to stand beside me through every season of life. His words reminded me why I had chosen him and why I had never regretted that decision. I also watched Mavis speaking with so much love and kindness that everyone in the room became emotional. Her message about family carried even more meaning now than it had on the wedding day. Then I saw myself. I expected to see a woman who looked defeated, but that wasn't what appeared on the screen. I saw someone who kept smiling even after being deeply hurt. I saw myself laughing with friends, thanking guests for coming, and enjoying every moment I could. I realized that my parents had not taken away my happiness. They had only chosen not to be part of it. A few days later, our videographer, Jonah Bellamy, called me. He said our wedding film had stayed in his mind because it told a story that was different from most weddings he had recorded. He told me he saw strength instead of sadness and hope instead of anger. He asked if I would allow him to use a few short parts of the video in a local storytelling project that celebrated people who overcame difficult moments. After talking it over with Caleb, I agreed. The project was shown at a community event attended by many local families. I wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong or embarrass my parents. I simply believed the story might encourage someone else who was going through a hard time. After people watched the video, many began to understand what had really happened. They saw the love that surrounded me and noticed the empty places where my parents should have been. Without anyone saying a word against them, people started asking their own questions. Slowly, the truth became impossible to ignore. Those who had believed I pushed my parents away realized they had only heard one side of the story. They understood that I had been trying to build a peaceful future, not start a family conflict. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I no longer had to defend myself. The truth had spoken for itself, and people finally saw me for who I really was. Not long after the community event, things started to change. Relatives who had once believed my parents' story began asking them difficult questions. They wanted to know why they had missed their own daughter's wedding. They wanted to understand why the video showed so much love from everyone except the people who should have been there first. My parents could no longer avoid those conversations. One afternoon, my father called and asked if we could meet. I agreed because I wanted to hear what they had to say. Caleb offered to come with me, but I felt this was something I needed to face on my own. When I arrived, both of my parents were waiting. I hoped this meeting would finally bring an honest apology. Instead, my mother immediately complained that people were judging them. She said the wedding video had made them look like bad parents, and that they were tired of answering questions from friends and relatives. Then my father said they had been embarrassed by everything that had happened. He told me that if I had handled things differently, none of this would have become such a big issue. I sat there quietly for a moment, listening to them place the blame on me once again. Finally, I realized I couldn't stay silent anymore. I looked at both of them and told them I had spent my entire life trying to become the daughter they wanted. I worked hard, stayed out of trouble, respected their rules, and always hoped they would one day be proud of me. No matter what I achieved, it never seemed to matter because they were always looking for something I didn't have instead of appreciating who I already was. I told them the wedding itself was not the hardest part. The deepest pain came from knowing they had chosen their pride over their own daughter. They cared more about controlling my future than standing beside me when I needed them most. That was the memory I carried every day. For the first time, neither of them had an answer. After a long silence, my mother softly said that we should forget the past and move on. She acted as if saying a few simple words would erase everything that had happened. My father nodded and said we were still family, so forgiveness should come naturally. I calmly shook my head. I told them forgiveness is not something that appears overnight. Trust cannot return just because someone wants life to go back to normal. Too much had happened, and too many choices had been made. I stood up and thanked them for meeting with me. Before leaving, I told them I truly hoped they would think about everything they had done, not just how it affected them, but how it affected me. As I walked out of the house, I felt something I had never felt before. I wasn't leaving with anger or guilt. I was leaving with peace. For the first time in my life, I chose to protect my own heart instead of spending another day chasing the approval I had never received. After that meeting, I stopped waiting for my parents to become different people. I accepted that I could not change their choices, but I could decide how I wanted to live my own life. Instead of spending my energy on old pain, I put my focus on building a future that made me happy. My interior design business continued to grow. More clients came through recommendations, and every new project gave me more confidence. I worked hard, treated people with respect, and enjoyed creating spaces that made families feel comfortable and welcome. Every success reminded me that I was capable of building something meaningful on my own. At home, Caleb and I created the peaceful life we had always dreamed about. We decorated every room together, laughed over small mistakes, and celebrated every achievement, no matter how small it seemed. Our house was not the biggest or the most expensive, but it was filled with kindness, honesty, and love. For me, that made it more valuable than anything money could buy. As time passed, I met people who had gone through struggles similar to mine. Some had been rejected by their families because of the choices they made. Others had spent years trying to earn love that never came. Listening to their stories reminded me that I was not alone. I joined a local support group where people shared their experiences in a safe and private space. When I finally told my own story, I was nervous at first. But instead of judging me, everyone listened with understanding. After the meeting, several people thanked me for speaking honestly. They said my journey gave them hope that life could become better after heartbreak. Those conversations changed me. I realized that my experience could help someone else find the strength to keep going. I didn't need to hide my past anymore because it had become part of the person I was. People sometimes asked me if I wanted revenge against my parents after everything they had done. My answer was always the same. I didn't want to hurt them. My greatest victory was living a happy life without carrying hate inside my heart. Every smile, every success, and every peaceful day showed that they had not destroyed my future. Over time, I heard through relatives that my parents had become much quieter. They saw pictures of the home Caleb and I had built and heard about my growing business. They also learned that I was helping others instead of speaking badly about them. Slowly, they began to understand what they had lost. They hadn't just missed a wedding. They had pushed away a daughter who truly loved them and wanted them in her life. That realization came far too late. Some choices leave marks that cannot be erased, and they finally understood that their decisions had changed our family forever. Almost a year passed after my wedding before I heard from my parents again. One evening, I received a short letter in the mail. It wasn't a birthday card or a holiday greeting. It was a simple note asking if I would meet them one last time. They said they wanted to talk honestly and expected nothing from me except the chance to be heard. I thought about it for several days before making my decision. I wasn't afraid to see them anymore. My life had changed, and I knew I was walking into that meeting as a stronger person than I had been before. We met at a quiet restaurant where no one would interrupt us. When I arrived, my parents were already sitting at the table. They looked older and much more tired than I remembered. For a few moments, nobody spoke. Finally, my father broke the silence. He admitted that they had made serious mistakes. He said they had spent too many years worrying about what other people thought instead of thinking about what their daughter needed. My mother quietly agreed. She said they had believed they were protecting me, but in reality, they had allowed their pride to destroy our relationship. Hearing those words brought many emotions to my heart. Part of me had waited a long time for this apology. Another part knew that an apology could not erase everything that had happened. I listened carefully without interrupting. When they finished speaking, I thanked them for finally telling the truth. Then I explained something they needed to understand. I told them that forgiveness is not the same as pretending the past never happened. The memories would always be part of my life. The pain they caused had changed me forever. While I no longer carried anger, I also could not act as if nothing had happened. I explained that trust takes time to rebuild. It grows through honest actions, not promises. If they truly wanted a relationship with me, it would have to be built slowly with respect, patience, and honesty. There would be no pretending and no blaming anyone else for the choices they had made. Both of them agreed. They didn't argue or make excuses this time. They simply accepted what I said. When the conversation ended, I felt lighter than I had in years. I didn't leave because everything had been fixed. I left because I finally understood that I no longer needed my parents to tell me I was enough. Their approval was no longer something that decided my worth. As I walked to my car, I smiled to myself. For so many years, I had been searching for acceptance in the wrong place. Now I had found it within myself. Whether my relationship with my parents became stronger or stayed distant would depend on the future. But my happiness no longer depended on their opinion. That was the greatest freedom I had ever experienced, and choosing myself was the best decision I had ever made. Looking back now, I sometimes think about how different my life might have been if my parents had chosen to attend my wedding. For a long time, I believed that day had been ruined forever. I thought their absence would always be the first thing I remembered whenever I thought about getting married. But as the years passed, I realized something surprising. The wedding I once believed was filled with heartbreak became the day that showed me who truly loved me. Life has a strange way of revealing the truth. Sometimes the people you expect to stand beside you are the first to walk away. At the same time, people who are not connected to you by blood can become the family you always wished for. I learned that love is shown through actions, not titles or promises. Many people still ask me about the wedding video. They think it became important because it exposed what my parents had done. The truth is, that was never the reason it mattered to me. Whenever I watch it now, I don't focus on who wasn't there. I focus on the people who stayed. I see smiles, warm hugs, happy tears, and moments that remind me I was never alone. That video also reminds me of something else. It shows a version of myself that refused to give up, even during one of the hardest days of my life. At the time, I didn't feel strong. I was simply trying to keep moving forward. Looking back now, I realize that every step I took that day was a step toward a better future. If there is one lesson I have learned, it is that losing people who refuse to love you the way you deserve is not the end of your story. Sometimes it is the beginning of finding yourself. It gives you the chance to build a life filled with people who respect you, support you, and celebrate your happiness without asking you to become someone else. Today, Caleb and I still laugh together over simple things. We spend time with the people who have always stood by us, sharing holidays, birthdays, and ordinary weekends that have become precious memories. Our home is filled with peace, and that peace is something I never take for granted. I no longer measure my life by the approval I once searched for. Instead, I measure it by the love I give, the kindness I receive, and the family we have chosen along the way. Those are the things that truly matter. If my story has taught me anything, it is this. Never let someone else's rejection convince you that you are not worthy of love. Your value has never depended on the opinion of people who failed to see your worth. Thank you for staying with me until the end of my story. I hope that if you are carrying pain from someone who walked away, you remember that your future is still waiting for you. Sometimes the happiest chapter of your life begins after the people who were never meant to be part of it choose to leave.